Ian, good morning. How are you?
Hi, Dan. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I had a couple of questions about Belichick going into this game. We always talk about Belichick takes away your best weapon. First of all, in doing your book with Belichick, understanding how he does this, does he look at Patrick Mahomes as Kansas City's best weapon or Tyreek Hill?
I think that's a very good question. He might look at Hill really more as the weapon to try to neutralize. It's hard to completely neutralize a quarterback, as you know. And if you go back to that first Super Bowl victory over the Rams, it was Marshall Faulk that he focused on. It was not Kurt Warner. Now, he wanted to hit Warner, of course, as often as his front could. But, in fact, he had a conversation with Chris Berman before that game where Berman asked him off camera, how are you going to win this game? And Belichick told him, Marshall Faulk will not beat us on Sunday. And he didn't. I mean, they made sure that they mauled him at every opportunity, wouldn't let him get out of the backfield, forced the officials to call fouls as often as possible until they decided they didn't want to be the story in that game. So, and Kurt Warner thought that was the philosophy, foul, 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 and at some point the referees are going to stop throwing the flag. And it was an interesting approach. But I could see this being more of a Hill game plan. I do think he wants to keep Mahomes in the pocket because when he's outside the pocket creating plays, that's when he's most dangerous.
You wrote in the last couple of pages of your book about Belichick losing that locker room because we still haven't received a full explanation on the benching of Malcolm Butler in the Super Bowl. Has he won that locker room back, and if so, how?
I think so, Dan, and I think just by being himself, by being the greatest coach. And the one thing about beyond the Butler benching in the Super Bowl, which really angered the vast majority of that roster, including Tom Brady, was the relationship with Brady had really fractured. I think it's amazing it took 18 years for that to happen, given just the immense pressure those two are under on a day-to-day basis, working in close quarters for 18 years to be the greatest ever at what they do. But it did happen, and I think that relationship needed to survive that one tumultuous moment in time, and it did. And now they're back to being a transactional, very successful partnership. I think they're in a pretty good working place, and that's a big part of it. But Tom Brady always knew that Belichick was the best coach in the league and probably the best coach of all time. It was just that after what happened last year, the way it happened, and then the Butler benching was sort of the final straw, and I think they just needed time to heal. They got that time, and now they're back in a good place. And outside of the one gaffe in Miami, putting Gronk on the field at the end of that game with the surreal lateral play against the Dolphins, I think Belichick actually had one of his better years coaching this football team.
And that I was going to bring that up. Like, how does Belichick, in good faith, good conscience, put Gronk out there as his safety? And that cost New England the number one seed. The title game would be in Foxborough this weekend.
All I would say is he's human. He makes mistakes. And even the greatest ever, they sometimes make mistakes. And I think that was a big one. And there's no reasonable explanation when there was no way Tannehill was going to be able to reach the end zone or even really come close to have Gronk on the field. It was just a mistake, a human mistake that the best coach in the league made. And frankly, going into this game Sunday, Dan, maybe he feels deep down in a place he would never admit exists for public consumption. He's got to find a way to make up for that because otherwise that game would be in Foxborough. The Patriots would probably be the favorite to win the game. I still think they have a good chance, if not a very good chance, to win at Arrowhead. But, yeah, that was damaging. It was just he's human, he made a mistake, and there's no reasonable explanation for it.
Who cares more about their legacy, Belichick or Brady?
I think deep down they both care deeply about it. I think that Brady and Belichick are really – I think when they say they don't care about stats, they only care about winning, they really actually mean it. I don't know if everybody really means it when they say it, but I think those two do. And I think that's how they're driven. You go back to the Belichick really I think there are wounds there from not being made the Giants head coach. That was the job he always wanted. It's a job he deserved. He didn't get it. The GM at the time, George Young, just despised him. And that's one of the main reasons why he didn't get that job. And the failures in Cleveland, the criticism. I think has really driven him across his career in New England. And Brady, of course, the chip on his shoulder from being the 199th pick in the draft. Lloyd Carr really coached him in an unforgiving way, just like Belichick. And that's part of the reason why the relationship with Belichick really unraveled last year. Is it wasn't just 18 straight years of unrelenting coaching from Belichick. It was 23 when you include the 5 with Lloyd Carr. And I think it wore Brady to the nub, and that's why it happened the way it did. But I think where he was drafted has really driven him over the years to be the greatest ever at what he does.
He's Ian O'Connor. The best-selling book is Belichick. It's online wherever books are sold. What's the one story you get asked about the most from the book?
I think people want to ask about really the way Bill is away from the office. And I have a lot of humanizing anecdotes in the book about the fact that it's a Jekyll and Hyde act, if you will. And I think it's strategic the way he is in his news conferences and the way America sees him. And his whole approach when he's at the office is 24/7, I'm only going to do what I think helps us win football games. And if that means putting on that act in his news conferences where he believes we're in the business of collecting information, never sharing it. Therefore, when I'm asked questions, I'm going to give as little information as possible. And that's just the way it's going to be. I think it's strategic. When he's away from the office talking to friends and associates, he's an entirely different human being. And he can be charming and engaging and kind and warm and all those things. And I have those anecdotes in the book. I think people around the country really wanted to see if that side actually exists, even though it's really at odds with the public persona that he carries on a daily basis.
If the Patriots would win the Super Bowl, the word retirement would probably come up for a couple of players. Who do you think would be labeled with that and follow through with retirement?
Well, I think Gronk especially. I mean, half the time he looks like a mummy out there on the field as it is. And if he can contribute to a championship team this year, he can go start his career in pro wrestling in Hollywood or be the next Schwarzenegger, whatever he wants to do. I think physically he's so beat to hell right now that would be the most logical, prominent player on the Patriots side to retire. Tom Brady, before the Super Bowl last year, Dan, he told a friend of his who told me that, hey, winning 3 out of 4 a second time would be a great way to go out. Now, publicly, Brady has said age 45. I think he's going to play some more. I had a conversation with him in the spring of 17 on the phone where we were talking about him playing at age 46 and 47, never mind 45. So even if he wins it, I think he's going to come back and play, but I think Gronk is the one who walks away.
See, I thought for sure that if Brady won last year, that was it. He was done. I think Giselle has put enough public pressure on him that it feels like when he goes home, he hears that too, that we have young kids. I want you to be around. I see what happens with these other players. I don't want you to, fall victim to that. So I thought for sure I'd be on the podium handing the trophy to him, and I would have been asking him about retirement.
Here's the thing, Dan, and you might be right, but he compelled the franchise to trade his much younger successor, Garoppolo, right? How do you then, after saying publicly you're going to play till you're at least 45, and you've now inspired the franchise to trade your successor, then walk away after 1 or 2 years at age 40, 41? I just don't think he can do that.
Okay, but how involved was he with Garoppolo? Because it's one of my favorite topics. It just feels like he orchestrated that. Whether he went above Belichick, went to Kraft, and said, look, I'll play, but you got to get rid of him. Fill us in on that.
I don't think he demanded the trade of Garoppolo. I definitely believe in talking to sources and talking to 350 people for this book, Dan, that he had conversations with Kraft about his security. He was very worried about Belichick moving away from him after the season and going with Garoppolo, and that's Bill's history. That's what he does. Tom Brady was worried about Garoppolo from the moment he was drafted in 2014. He was worried about Garoppolo after his last game in Kansas City early in that 2014 season. So that has been a very big part of his run over these last 5 seasons, or 4 seasons anyway, with Garoppolo there, the fear that he would lose his job. And he's always been like that. He was like that at Michigan with Drew Henson. He probably had more cause to worry back at Michigan with Drew Henson. But I do think he had conversations with his owner, who he has a great, warm relationship with, about securing his future. And then from that, Bill walks away and makes the move. I don't think Tom Brady ever said, you have to trade Jimmy Garoppolo.
Did you find out if Belichick read the book?
No, I haven't heard directly from him. I've heard from people around him. My belief is he devotes so much time and energy to the season, he didn't have time to read the whole thing. I know people around him read it and briefed him on it. I have not heard directly from him, but I did send him a note when I sent him the book, and I just hoped in the note I expressed this that he just saw it as a fair and exhaustive examination of his career and his life.
You know, knowing Belichick, he probably gave an assignment to somebody. I need a book report on this thing. Right?
You're exactly right. Yeah, and but maybe someday we'll have a conversation about it. He did not cooperate, of course, for the book, but I just hope he sees it for what it was intended to be, and that was fair.
Ian, thank you. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Dan.
ESPN senior writer, author of the New York Times bestseller, Belichick, Ian O'Connor.
For more Dan Patrick Show, tune to Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV or download the Dan Patrick Show app.